what we care about, what we want to know about it. Somebody was telling me about the new high-end video games where there's wolf attacks, and I went, oh, we all understand that, you know, it's very dramatic, but it's, what works, and then you try and apply that to technology. I was going to say, sort of related to that, when we got to the DS, it was 320 by 240, which was the same resolution as an Atari arcade machine, and I went, oh, now there's two of them, and there's probably more processing power than we ever had in the arcade.
Yeah. No, it is funny how the game systems have evolved and the entire industry and the technology has evolved. And with that evolution, I mean, we find ourselves in 2013 with the greatest and most expansive game audience of any time. The game industry itself grew at a GDP to over 10%, where the entire economy grew at less than 3%. So this is a growing space, and more game players all the time. The fastest growing game segment are women over the age of 30. And so what does this growing audience of gamers mean to you as a game developer?
More people to make games for. It's interesting you bring that up. When we were at Atari, people were saying, hey, how can we get girls to play games? And the thinking then was like, girls don't care about games. Games are gadgets. Girls care about socializing. Girls don't play games. Well, they figured out how to make games that include socializing, and now women are playing games. So the limitations that you see can be gotten to. I mean, if you say this doesn't work for this reason, there's a way around that. If you can make it entertaining, you can engage people.
Do you develop games for a specific psychographic? Do you think that I want to think about?
Psychographic. That's a good term.
do you want to? I mean, you know, in our parlance in our industry, Zynga talks about they design games for the 40-year-old woman. And they have this psychographic of who she is, the soccer mom, and doing all of this. But at Disney and in your own design, do you design for a psychographic?
That's funny. What we do, you all make art, right? I mean, I think the best art you kind of make for yourself, and hopefully it appeals to other people. We do have a woman on our team who is the exact age of our demographic, so we always say, okay, so what do you think? We try and make things that are fun. We try and make things that engage us and would engage other people. And then we do an incredible amount of user testing. We have a facility in Palo Alto where we can give people the game. We ask them to, while they're playing the game, talk out loud about what they're thinking, so we can just hear their process, when they're confused, when they're trying to find something, and they're polite enough to do that. And we take away things that confuse them. We all talk about how brutal the user testing is, because they just never understand that stuff you think is so obvious. you have to go, it's yellow, it's throbbing, come on. So I think it's really good. Family members, if you don't have an official testing thing, but try your game on people, sit them down. What do you see? Do you understand it?
In our world, in the transmedia world, we believe in this concept of prototyping, right? And in the lean startup methodology, we talk about that you should always be embarrassed by the first product that you release.
Oh, that's good.
And obviously Disney doesn't do this, but do you do this in your tests and with family and friends and with each other?
I think we should do it more. I mean, we're too careful and trying to do safe stuff. That's not always the case, but because it's really expensive, the larger companies are not going to take huge risks. But the best way to deal with that is trying to come up with a quick way to prototype. When I worked with Ed Log on Steel Talents, he had a just flat blue sky, and I said, let me give you a gradient, we can make the sky pretty. And he goes, I don't want that. He says, if it's fun ugly, it'll be fun pretty. And he would just really want to rough the game in and play it, and then if it's fun, make it pretty. And I think that kind of like rough prototyping, simple trying things, I recommend the IDO company, when they try things, they build a foam core version of a vending machine and have somebody push the can up, and you just, try things as quickly as possible. I have heard people that do a board game version of their game to see how it plays as a board game and test it out. So any way that you can get something alive to interact with is good.
I agree completely, and I think that, you know, what we've seen, and I was saying here tonight, there's a lot of experimentation and a lot of real, you know, bravery and outreach in the student work that we're seeing. And you mentioned something there, you talked about, you know, the big companies being a little bit safe. And what we found at GDC this year is that 47% of people that are walking through the door that have bought a ticket are identifying themselves as indies. And that they're looking, 57% are saying that they're looking to develop for tablets or iPhones. So what do you think this indie market is doing to that realm of safe of EA and the big console players?
Blazing the trail. When I go to GDC, I go to the indies first because I feel like all the other stuff is predictable and more of the same. So to me, that's where the interesting things are going on. If you like films and you go to an independent film festival, those are the people who cared enough about that idea to make it anyway, and it's usually got something behind it. So I think that's where the real stuff is happening. I go there just to appreciate it and hope that we can do something that interesting ourselves.
Cool. Well, you know, I'm going to actually see if we can't pull out the crystal ball. This is the hardest thing to do, right? Because as I said earlier, the easiest way to predict the future is to invent it, and so we're counting on everybody in this room to help with that. So if you've got some comments about some of these things, the games business is one that has a lot of movement that's currently happening. And we actually even see it around the rooms, right? Right here we've got a couple of perceptual computing installations. In this other room there's a great interactive game that involves perceptual computing. So let's talk about some of these future technologies and how you see them impacting your work at Disney Playdom and your work as a designer. So let's start with perceptual computing.
Explain to me what perceptual computing is.
Okay, so the baby is looking at us and she has been all night. So what we're looking at here is other than handheld interaction with the computing system. If you smile at that baby, it'll smile back. And gesture check, right? With like a Xbox Live and the Wii. Yeah, Connect. Oh, there you go. See the head move?
That's great. I'm trying to think of something profound to say about it. I think it's delightfully entertaining, and my feeling with all the possibilities is as soon as they're well used, then they're totally justified. I mean, so that I never would have guessed that Facebook or an iPhone would have been game platforms,
Right.
but as soon as there's games that work on them, then they are viable. So the way to make those things work is to make a really entertaining version of a game, and they are real.
You know, and one of the things I want to say about that for this audience, and I have been in this industry myself for decades, and you know, we were so super excited about holograms and hologram technology, and this technology has been around for decades. And we have not yet been able to integrate it into anything more exciting than, you know, an imprint on your credit card. You know,
it makes a great paperweight.
Yeah. So you know, there are technologies that actually can be fully implemented and that can be really exciting and used. And you know, and there are things that you just have to wonder about. You know, Google at South by Southwest introduced the Google Shoe. Did anybody see the Google Shoe? The shoe that talks to you? And I'm thinking, maybe not. I don't really want my shoes talking to me. So it's interesting.
Depends on how entertaining they are.
But now there have been some really incredible movements. Yeah. What are your shoes telling you? Yeah, either change your socks, walk faster.
That's right.
But so one of the things that I want to get to, and then I'd like to open it up, and if anybody has questions, start raising your hand so Maya can see where you're at. So there's been this huge movement with all of the improvements in GPUs and pixel format and this speed and processing power of the systems with new micro consoles coming out on the market. One of the most popular games today is Minecraft, a low-res open world game. And so what do you think of that phenomenon?
I think it's fresh, and you get to do, I mean, the stuff I've seen from Minecraft is just astonishing use of the game engine to do something you never would have imagined. So it's a set of possibilities, that wonderful thing about video games where you build a system that has possibilities that even you can't conceive of all the final results of. It has that in spades, so it's just, there's a lot of possibilities there.
Great. So we have a question here.
Hey, hi,
Hey.
hi Chuck, I'm Jennifer. So
Hi.
huge fan of 60s, 70s, and 80s cartoons, obviously.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, what do you bring forward into games? What did you bring forward into games from your animation days? And what do you think is you're gonna bring, that's sort of being consistent, or that's had a continuity, or something that connects the two in a way that's, special to you?
Well, to animate well, you have to do acting and you have to make it emotional. And I think this baby is a wonderful example, but we are emotional creatures and we have these brains, but we're basically feeling creatures trapped in a thinking world. So the more emotional things are, the more engaging they are, and when I have limitations, like I can only have one pose for a character, then I try and make that pose represent their attitude and help their acting. So it's trying to take the things that make entertainment work and include those in games and not be blind to those.
Great question. And while we're finding if anybody else in the audience has a question, it brings up something I was talking at GDC today with some folks about the role of storytelling in games. And with the new advances in neurotechnology, we've actually been able to map in the brain the different parts of the brain that light up. Right? When you're playing a game and shooting something, it's really the medulla oblongata, it's the lower cortex of the brain that's being lit up. And when you're involved in the story, it's the cerebral cortex. It's the higher and more evolved parts of our brains that light up. And so as game developers, we're really beginning to understand the power and the importance of story in game. And so in your work at Disney, do you take that into, I mean, obviously Disney's always been a lot about story. But how does that play out in the new products that you're developing?
We try to make them entertaining. We test them and see if they are actually working. We interview people and say, what do you know now from this thing? But it's I think we all know a lot about stories. Doing stories really well is not as easy as it should be. And to really make characters that engage you and that you respond to takes some effort. So we're trying to learn more and more about that. And we experiment, but we also have a wonderful legacy of characters that people respond to and like, and that's really nice. So we can take advantage of that.
Great, we have a question.
Thank you for bringing cinematography to video games, first of all. And second of all, what's the next innovation? What's the next thing that's like that? I'm sorry that I stepped on that.
And I would like to pretend that I know what that is. I think the things that actually work are things that are familiar. So I think it will be something that we know from another medium that comes through.
Maybe olfactory.
Yes. Well, the whole problem with smell, it's interesting. You have to move the air around. The reason smell-o-vision in theaters and scratch and sniff stuff is there's this kind of, the air surrounding you has to be moved. So if we get virtual reality with a fan, so you can deliver it and take it away. But they had a whole issue with trying to get the air in the theater with the smell on to the next thing. So there are issues with that.
Yeah, well, I was really interested by all your slides, which show a sort of little history of graphics in video games. It's really fascinating, and I was wondering what, I mean, we went from static hand drawings to pixel pictures and more like realistic 3D graphics. And I was wondering what the necessity of coherence between different media in the transmedia games, what does it bring as new challenge for graphic and visual artists? Does it bring bring a necessity for new tools or new skills, or what are the new challenges for graphic artists in terms of character design or visual arts?
New tools are always fun. I'm a big fan of new tools. When my son one time, I told him, The Sims is a really hard game to work on. It's kind of a sandbox. And he thought about it for a while. He looks at me and he says, give people really cool shovels. But that's how I think of tools. I mean, a good tool allows you to do things you want to do more easily and without the other levels of thinking that are involved. It's interesting, I don't know if it's a perfect response to that. Has everyone heard of the uncanny valley? Is that but there's this thing when you're trying to make things realistic that it actually gets harder and harder to make them actually convincing. And I really appreciate stylization, you know, The Incredibles versus Final Fantasy X.